Most amateur players either have a regular job or study at a university and therefore only have time to train in the evening. On the contrary, youth players who are playing on the highest national youth levels train twice a day, once in the afternoon and once in the evening. This changes your perspective because you have to cram a lot more training content into a tighter schedule in order to prepare your team as effectively as possible. Naturally, this leads to varying fitness levels that should make any reasonable coach come to the realization that they can't expect their team to put the drills into practice in the same way a professional team does. You always have to be aware of the circumstances and also the conditions you're practicing on. There's a difference between practicing on a well-kept pitch and a pitch that is in miserable condition. Is it an artificial pitch? Those are things you have to take into consideration. What about repetitions? I don't think repetitions matter too much. I mean, sure, every team requires a certain amount of time before they get used to a new drill. If it doesn't run smoothly the first or the second time, then it might be necessary to repeat the drill over the course of several weeks. And here's the difference. Because of the limited amount of practices, you have to be rigorous and effective in order for your team to really make progress. But I think if you're creative and original and you set up your training sessions accordingly, you can repeat the same drills in consecutive weeks. You just have to make sure that your training sessions are diversified. Can you elaborate on this? Well, a training session is divided into 3 parts: the warm-ups, the main phase, and the last part, which mostly consists of some form of training game. If your training sessions are going to be diversified, you can't just repeat the same warm-up routine in every second training session. If you're coaching a semi-professional team 3 times a week, you have to make sure to diversify the warm-up routine. Otherwise, your players will get bored after a couple of weeks, because then they know what's coming. But isn't it a different story with pre-game warm-ups? Those don't change, right? No, they don't. There's no difference here between professional and minor league teams. You can definitely see that the pre-game warm-up routine is the same, and it's tailored specifically to the team by the coach. And why is the pre-game routine always the same? Well, a player needs his rhythm, and this rhythm can be best attained by repetition. The players have to get a feel for the ball, they have to get warmed up, and they have to increase their heart rate as well as the blood circulation in order to lower the risk of injury. On our squad, it's the skipper's job to work with the other 9 starting outfield players during pre-game warm-ups. They start off with some easy running and a few individual moves with the ball before we switch to more team-oriented passing circulations with either a 1-touch or a 2-touch limit. Are there any other movements that you incorporate? Yes, heel lifts after passing the ball, for example. There are many different pre-game passing drills which involve a number of movements that the players can do after they pass the ball over to one of their teammates. But those drills can be done during a regular training session as well, right? Yes, they can absolutely be done during regular training sessions as well. And the more touches a player can get during warm-ups, the better. If you include the ball in any type of warm-up routine, your players are more likely to have up to 100 or more touches each training session. And this will help your players tremendously in becoming better overall footballers, especially if you only train twice a week. Then you have to make sure to be creative in planning your training program so that your players are guaranteed a high volume of touches each week. Do you have specific drills in your repertoire for that? And where can other coaches find them? There are many possibilities to find those drills. One way is to study our training videos. We have a variety of those drills. Observing an open training session of a professional club might help as well and allow you to take away some bits and pieces that you can use for your practice. It's definitely interesting to see what clubs, like Bayern or Arsenal, do to prepare for a match. I know that not everyone has a chance to watch such a training session, but you still should be able to find some team near you that might be an option. Let's talk some more about your training. I had the privilege of participating in a couple of your training sessions. And I noticed that you put great emphasis on accurate passing, good ball control, and a lot of ball movement. During the main phase of the training sessions, we were doing lots of goal shots, and everything had to be straightforward and precise. There was very little room for unconventional pieces of skill. That's true, because I think in an ideal world, the technical groundwork of any player is laid earlier, when the players are still much younger. But since juking a defender has become more and more important in today's game, especially near or inside the box, I do think it's imperative that you still try to get the most out of the players in that regard. It's no secret that players make mistakes when they're under pressure, and goals are normally scored in pressure situations. Even on the amateur levels, there's so much speed involved in passing and tackling. And since many players who play on that level don't have the same technical skills like Messi or Ribéry, we try to put the emphasis on scoring when we're practicing feints and tricks. Even though the numbers tell a different story this season when it comes to scoring goals. In my opinion, players have more fun and work much more target-oriented when we lay the focus on scoring, regardless whether we're practicing passing, trapping and controlling the ball or tackling. This is much more enjoyable and purposeful than just aimlessly during the moves and tricks. The players should always have to juke a defender, and since scoring goals is the main objective of playing football, we always try to combine these two things. And if the defender holds the upper hand, then he might be able to initialize a counter-attack and score himself. But defenders have to be able to perform certain moves as well, right? I'm thinking of something like a body swerve to fool the attacker, or swiping the ball away in order to pass it over to the side. That's something they should also be able to do, right? Yes, absolutely, and this is something we practice as well, but then we predetermine what type of move the defender should do. We try to make sure our defenders first figure out the mechanics. That's why they start off with a dummy, a pole, or some other obstacle. They have to tap the ball with the sole, or use the outside of their weaker foot to get the ball over to their strong side. Once they know what to do, we create a one-on-one situation with a live opponent. So this is definitely something we practice as well, just not as much. And you finish off with a training game? Yes, we do finish most training sessions with some variation of a training game. Maybe a 5-on-5 or 6-on-6, or a game on a smaller-sized playing field. During those games, does your A team play versus your B team? Or do you mix up your starters and your substitute players? Rarely, maybe once a week. How often do you practice in a week? 3 or 4 times? We train 3 times a week. And for the most part, we have a good number of participating players, which is crucial for having a successful season. The more often a player participates, the more likely he's going to get better. You can't make any progress if you only come to training twice a month. When are you working on technical aspects? We're always focusing on technical skills during warm-ups and the main phase, but also during the training games. What about coordination? We usually train the players' coordinative skills during speed and agility training, which we do once a week. And there we try to involve the ball as well and combine it with coordination tools like ladders and poles. Isn't it the coach's job to make this type of speed training palatable for the players? Sure. Even though I don't think sprinting drills are too vigorous, they're rather something that helps you to improve your explosiveness. You just have to make sure not to do too many repetitions and to provide the players with enough recovery intervals so that they can recuperate properly from the sprints. You simply have to be creative and make it interesting for the players. Sure, you could also isolate this type of training, but my advice would be to combine it with the use of the ball, for example, with shooting on goal. You can also use an agility ladder, some poles and a ball. The players need a purpose, maybe heading the ball in the end. Or you can create a competition by having 2 players go against each other and the loser gets some form of punishment. There are many options here. Ear flicking, which is quite popular with football players, or maybe 5 to 10 push-ups. Just something that isn't too harsh or exhausting, but still something that benefits the team or the player individually. Everything we've talked about so far is aimed at coaching senior-level players, but can this also be applied to youth player coaching? Sure, but it has to be more simplified and the level of exertion has to be adjusted accordingly. It depends on the age of the players you're training. Around the age of 16, you can introduce the players to a more senior-level-oriented coaching, since their playing career will mostly be on the senior level from there on out. Player development is crucial during those years because the kids are all in different development stages, physically and mentally, and they all have different needs and interests. This is extremely tough to handle for any coach. At first, you need someone who is great with bambinis, the youngest ones. During those years, you need a coach who is more like a big brother to the kids, almost like a player coach. Then, when the players are around 16 to 17, you also need someone who might be a bit tougher on them at times. When the players are about 12 to 14, you also have to be a psychologist at times. Someone who's able to handle kids, and someone who understands what they're going through when they're at that age. The hormones might make them act a certain way one day and completely different the next.